Qatar, long known as a strategic player in regional politics, has reportedly entered the conflict with a vengeance, resulting in the loss of an unprecedented number of Israeli soldiers, 20,000, according to the latest reports. This is not just another headline. This is a geopolitical earthquake, shaking the foundations of the region and forcing every nation to reconsider its position. Imagine 20,000 trained soldiers, lives devoted to national defense, wiped from the battlefield in a single, catastrophic surge of conflict. The scale is almost unimaginable, and yet it is happening before our very eyes. Now, let us pause and reflect on the broader implications. Qatar's involvement signals a dramatic shift in the balance of power, not just in the Middle East, but across the globe. When a small but highly influential nation exerts military force with such precision and intensity, it sends a message that cannot be ignored. What we are seeing is more than just military maneuvering. It is a clear demonstration of political will, technological sophistication, and strategic foresight. And it raises urgent questions. How will Israel respond? How will the United States and Europe react to such unprecedented losses? And perhaps most critically, what does this mean for regional stability in the months and years to come? Qatar's recent intervention in the ongoing Middle Eastern conflict represents a seismic shift in regional dynamics, a development that demands our full attention. What is striking is not merely that Qatar has taken decisive action, but that it has done so in a way that reshapes traditional perceptions of power. For decades, analysts and policymakers assumed that influence in the Middle East was the domain of the large and established states. Nations with sprawling militaries, deep financial reserves, and historical dominance. Yet here we see a relatively small nation asserting itself with a level of precision and impact that few could have anticipated. This is a classic illustration of how strategic foresight, combined with targeted capabilities, can allow smaller actors to punch well above their weight. Consider the geopolitical calculus involved. Every military maneuver, every decision to mobilize resources is not isolated. It reverberates through alliances, it challenges long-standing assumptions, and it forces observers to ask uncomfortable questions about the stability of the region. How could such a small state affect such profound outcomes? And what does this mean for the assumptions that underpin global diplomacy? The audacity of Qatar's approach lies in its timing and selectivity. The decision to intervene was not reckless. It was calculated, aimed at achieving maximum leverage with minimal exposure. This is the hallmark of a nation that understands the complex interplay of politics, military strategy, and regional optics. Each move sends signals, both to allies and adversaries, about intent, capability, and willingness to act decisively. What makes this intervention particularly remarkable is the combination of restraint and aggression. Qatar has managed to position itself as a decisive actor without overextending, demonstrating an acute understanding of modern conflict, where perception is as critical as reality. The message is clear. Influence today is not measured solely by the size of armies, but by the clarity of strategy, the precision of execution, and the ability to shape outcomes in ways that shift regional calculations. Moreover, the intervention underscores a shift in the nature of power itself. Traditional hierarchies, which relied on sheer numbers or economic heft, are increasingly supplanted by nimbleness, strategic alliances, and the capacity to exploit vulnerabilities. Qatar's action exposes the limitations of conventional thinking that equates size with dominance. In an era where information, Technology and rapid decision-making are pivotal. Even smaller states can dramatically alter the course of events. Observers across the globe are now forced to reassess their frameworks for understanding influence. How resilient are large states when confronted with nimble, strategically sophisticated actors? And how will the international community adapt to a landscape in which smaller nations wield disproportionate impact? These are not merely theoretical questions, they are practical, urgent concerns with real-world consequences. The implications of this intervention extend beyond military metrics. It is a political statement, a challenge to established hierarchies, and a signal that traditional power dynamics are in flux. Qatar has shown that a nation's strategic vision, coupled with timely action, can create leverage far exceeding its apparent capacity. This is a lesson not only for the Middle East, but for international relations as a whole. In a world where agility, foresight, and calculated risk define outcomes, influence can emerge from unexpected quarters. Analysts must now reconsider their assumptions about who holds power, who shapes narratives, and who ultimately determines the trajectory of regional conflicts. Qatar's boldness serves as a vivid reminder that in modern geopolitics, the rules are changing, and those who underestimate smaller actors do so at their own peril. The reported loss of 20,000 Israeli soldiers in this unprecedented surge of conflict is a figure that is difficult to fully comprehend. Yet it demands that we stop and reflect on its broader significance. Numbers, while cold and abstract on paper, represent human lives, families shattered, communities destabilized, and generations whose futures are abruptly altered. Each of these soldiers was more than a statistic. Each carried with them aspirations, responsibilities, and the invisible weight of human connection. When we speak of 20,000 fallen, we are talking about 20,000 intersecting stories of courage, fear, sacrifice, and hope cut short. The sheer scale forces us to confront the human cost of geopolitical maneuvering in a way that is both urgent and inescapable. In these moments, we are reminded that war is never just about strategy, territory, or influence. It is fundamentally about people, and the reverberations of such a loss extend far beyond the battlefield. What makes this development particularly compelling, and indeed alarming, is the velocity and concentration of the impact. In modern military history, such a rapid and devastating loss is almost unprecedented, particularly for a nation with Israel's advanced defense infrastructure. How could this happen? What does this reveal about the evolving nature of warfare, intelligence, and preparedness? The implications are profound. It challenges assumptions about military invincibility and forces military analysts, politicians, and the public alike to reconsider long-held beliefs about security deterrence and strategic superiority. When the unexpected occurs on such a scale, it serves as a stark reminder that even the most robust systems are vulnerable to disruption when confronted with strategic ingenuity and concentrated execution. Beyond the immediate military consequences, the psychological and societal effects are immense. Nations are not only measured by their borders or armies, but by the resilience of their people and institutions. The shockwave of losing 20,000 soldiers is felt across every level of Israeli society, from the families of the fallen to the morale of those who remain on active duty. Communities grieve, institutions scramble to respond, and the national consciousness is forced to reconcile pride in defense capabilities with the raw reality of vulnerability. Here lies an essential lesson. War is never an abstract exercise, it is lived experience. and its consequences ripple outward, touching every corner of society in ways that numbers alone cannot capture. We must also consider the ripple effects on neighboring states and the international community. When a nation suffers such catastrophic losses, allies and adversaries alike are compelled to reassess their calculations. Diplomatic ties, military cooperation, and regional stability all hang in a delicate balance. The human toll, magnified on this scale, intensifies political pressure both domestically and internationally. Policymakers are forced into urgent deliberation: how to respond, how to prevent further losses, and how to protect the populations that rely on their decisions. It becomes clear that the intersection of human vulnerability and political calculation is not a theoretical concept. It is a practical, immediate challenge that must be addressed in real time. Finally, this event underscores the sobering reality that human lives are the ultimate measure of any conflict's magnitude. Strategy, resources, and technology, while essential, cannot mitigate the profound ethical and emotional consequences of mass casualties. As analysts, historians, and citizens, we are compelled to reckon not only with the strategic ramifications, but with the profound human story embedded within these numbers. 20,000 soldiers, 20,000 human lives, and the cascading impact on millions more. This is the lens through which we must understand the full significance of this tragic development. It is in this intersection of human cost and geopolitical consequence that the gravity of the event is most fully revealed, challenging us to think, feel, and respond with a depth that statistics alone cannot convey. The global political ramifications of Qatar's intervention and the staggering losses suffered by Israel cannot be overstated, and they demand careful scrutiny. In the interconnected world of international relations, no significant military or political event occurs in isolation, and this latest development is a textbook example of ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate region. When 20,000 soldiers fall in a single, concentrated wave of conflict, the reverberations are felt across capitals, parliaments, and strategic command centers from Washington to Brussels to Beijing. Policymakers must now confront the uncomfortable reality that long-standing alliances, treaties, and deterrence strategies may not be sufficient to navigate this new landscape. The sheer scale of the losses forces a re-evaluation of assumptions about military preparedness, strategic foresight, and the capacity of even the most advanced nations to respond to unconventional, rapid shifts in regional power. Consider the position of global powers observing these events. The United States, historically a key supporter of Israel, is faced with immediate and profound questions about its role, its commitments, and the extent to which it can influence outcomes in a rapidly changing theater. European nations, many of which rely on Middle Eastern stability for both economic and political reasons, are compelled to reassess their strategies, alliances, and contingencies. Even nations that have maintained a distance from direct involvement in the region are forced to reconsider their foreign policies, military postures, and diplomatic engagement. The shockwave of Qatar's intervention illustrates a critical principle of modern geopolitics. No country, however distant, can afford to remain indifferent to sudden and large-scale shifts in regional power. The world is watching, calculating, and adjusting in real time, and every decision carries the weight of consequences that may unfold over decades. This development also exposes the fragility of established alliances and the fluidity of international loyalties. When a nation suffers losses of this magnitude, it is not only a military problem, but a political one. Internal pressures mount as citizens demand accountability, leadership is scrutinized, and opposition voices seize the moment to challenge prevailing narratives. In parallel, allies may reconsider the level of support they are willing to provide, while adversaries are emboldened to exploit perceived weaknesses. The geopolitical chessboard has shifted dramatically, and the stakes for every player are higher than they have been in decades. In this context, Qatar's intervention is not just a local act of force. It is a signal to the world that the rules of engagement are evolving and that small, strategic actors can dramatically alter outcomes that were previously assumed to be controlled by traditional powers. Furthermore, the conflict raises urgent questions about the nature of international law, humanitarian obligations, and the ethical responsibilities of global leaders. When 20,000 soldiers are killed in such a concentrated time frame, the world is forced to reckon with the limitations of existing mechanisms for crisis management, intervention, and conflict resolution. Diplomatic channels are tested, emergency summits convened, and international organizations face immense pressure to respond effectively, if not immediately. The speed and scale of the losses highlight the growing complexity of modern warfare, where regional actions have near instant global political consequences. Every decision taken or delayed by global leaders is scrutinized, and the stakes for miscalculation are exponentially higher than in previous decades. This moment, therefore, is not merely a regional crisis but a defining test of global political systems. How will alliances adapt? How will powers project influence, mediate conflict, and ensure that the balance of stability is maintained? The human losses are staggering, but the political reverberations may reshape international relations for years to come. Qatar's audacious move has forced the world into a heightened state of awareness and urgency, proving that in today's geopolitical landscape, no action is localized, no strategy occurs in isolation, and every event has global resonance. Leaders, analysts, and citizens alike are witnessing firsthand how a single, calculated intervention can challenge assumptions, redraw boundaries, and redefine the political order on a continental and global scale. The economic and strategic consequences of Qatar's intervention and the devastating losses suffered by Israel extend far beyond the immediate military sphere, touching every corner of the global system in ways that demand our urgent attention. Conflicts of this magnitude rarely remain confined to the battlefield. They ripple through energy markets, disrupt trade routes, and challenge long-standing assumptions about global economic stability. The Middle East, already a region of immense strategic importance due to its energy reserves and geopolitical positioning, now faces heightened uncertainty that could reverberate across global economies. Investors, governments, and multinational corporations alike are forced to re-evaluate risk assessments, contingency planning, and strategic partnerships as they confront the potential for supply chain disruptions, volatile oil and gas prices, and unexpected shifts in regional alliances. The scale of Qatar's action illustrates a key lesson in modern geopolitics. Economic systems are intimately intertwined with political and military developments, and a single bold move can trigger far-reaching consequences that ripple across the globe. Consider the implications for energy markets, which are acutely sensitive to instability in the Middle East. Qatar, a major natural gas exporter, has demonstrated the power to influence not only regional dynamics but global energy security. Disruptions in production, transportation, or regional cooperation could have immediate effects on prices, supply stability, and the economic strategies of nations dependent on reliable energy sources. The consequences are not hypothetical. They are immediate and tangible, affecting everything from household energy bills to national industrial strategies. This event underscores the vulnerability of interconnected systems, where geopolitical shocks translate quickly into economic turbulence, forcing nations and corporations to respond with agility and foresight or risk significant losses. Strategically, the intervention highlights a paradigm shift in how nations must approach security and preparedness. Military power alone is no longer sufficient to safeguard national interests in an era defined by unpredictability and rapid escalation. Nations must account for the complex interplay of diplomacy, economic leverage, and military readiness. The loss of 20,000 soldiers is a human tragedy, but it also exposes vulnerabilities in planning, coordination, and strategic anticipation. How can nations anticipate the actions of smaller, but strategically sophisticated actors like Qatar? How can they balance deterrence with diplomacy when regional power dynamics shift overnight? These are questions that demand serious analysis and creative solutions, because the cost of miscalculation is measured not only in economic terms but in lives and geopolitical influence. The broader implications extend to international trade and regional cooperation. The Middle East serves as a critical hub for global commerce, hosting key maritime routes, logistics centers, and trade corridors. Instability in one part of the region can cascade through shipping lanes, affect export-import balances, and create uncertainty that reverberates from Asia to Europe to the Americas. Nations that once relied on predictable patterns of stability must now reassess their risk exposure, insurance policies, and investment strategies. Multinational corporations, financial institutions, and even governments must navigate a landscape where traditional assumptions about security and reliability no longer apply. In this context, Qatar's decisive intervention demonstrates the power of a single actor to disrupt not only military and political calculations, but the very foundations of economic planning on a global scale. Finally, the strategic consequences of this development extend beyond immediate economic and military concerns to the realm of long-term regional influence. The intervention has redefined perceptions of power, signaling that smaller, agile nations can exert disproportionate influence through calculated action. Global actors must recognize that regional stability is no longer guaranteed by traditional hierarchies of power. Influence is now determined by a combination of strategic foresight, timing, and operational precision. The ramifications are profound. Nations must reconsider alliances, trade agreements, and security frameworks in light of a rapidly changing reality. Qatar's intervention has made clear that in the 21st century geopolitical landscape, the intersection of economic leverage, strategic planning, and military action can shift the balance of power instantly, leaving no actor untouched and no system immune to disruption. In closing, let us remember that beyond the statistics and the headlines are human lives, political ambitions, and the fragile threads of peace that bind nations together. Qatar's surge, the staggering loss of 20,000 Israeli soldiers, and the shockwaves across the world are reminders of the urgent need for dialogue, diplomacy, and strategic foresight. We must study these events not merely as spectators, but as participants in a global conversation about power, responsibility, and the future of international stability. History will judge this moment, and we must ensure that we learn from it, understand it, and act with clarity and conscience.